Hi there. I'm so glad that you could be here for this. I'm going to hop back onto the yoga mat now that you're here. So the objective here of this short video is to give you a framework for building your yoga sequence. Now, you may already have my sequence building template. If you don't, I want you to email me after you watch this video to Karen@barebonesyoga.com, because I'll send you my sequence building template as well as a separate video on how to build a yoga sequence. Today, though, what I'm going to do is actually build the sequence with you. And the reason I'm doing this is because in my work with teachers inside my program, and in the hundreds of conversations I have every month with yoga teachers all over the world, not only is sequence building one of the primary things they tell me they have the most trouble with, it's also something where they spend the most time. It's also something that has so many beliefs tied to it, beliefs that are not facts, that are not truisms, that are simply beliefs that drive teachers to do so many different things when it comes to sequence building. And as a result, they can't remember their sequence. They need to practice with their class to stay on track. They have all sorts of anxiety before they go in and teach. They worry, is this class worth it? Will the students like it? Will they get bored if I teach a similar sequence from class to class? All of these things are beliefs. And so what I want to do, and something I actually have not done before, is actually show you how to build a sequence. And I'm doing it in a very intentional way by really eliminating a lot of the transitions that can create a lot of confusions for teachers. Now, this is not going to be the whole thing because I'm going to condense it into about 20 to 25 minutes. So I want you to imagine you're adding in time for holding people in poses. That's going to be a big thing that I'm not going to do here. I'm not going to stay in downward facing dog for 4 to 5 breaths, for instance. And I'm not going to do some of the ending poses and hold them for the time that you typically would do. So even though this is not going to be, let's say, 60 minutes, you can definitely see how simply holding people in the poses is going to elongate the length of the practice itself. But the important thing that I want you to take away from this is that even if you teach a very essential sequence, it can still be very powerful. And the power comes from, in large part, how you show up. Because when you show up to teach a class and you've been up all night worrying about it, and you've spent hours pulling together from resources, different ways to transition, different poses, etc., that is not a sequence that you can teach confidently. And when you don't show up teaching confidently, you lose your ability to be confident and to teach clearly and to teach in a way that really speaks directly to the students and really helps them appreciate and enjoy and go into their practice in a very focused way. Because for many of them, they're confused over the cues you're using, or maybe they can't hear you because you're practicing with them and your voice is going right into the mat. There are many, many problems that come from creating sequences that we can't teach well and the beliefs that go with them. So with that, I hope you can have an open mind here and stay curious, because curiosity is such a great quality to have. So as I'm giving you this intro, if you find yourself feeling some of those beliefs coming up and doubting that there is another way, stay in curiosity. This is easier if you're newer, harder if you've been teaching for a while, but we all can find new and different ways to do things. And I want you to ultimately ask yourself this question: how is my sequencing going? How do I feel when I go in to teach? Do I feel confident? Am I able to teach my classes without practicing with the students? Am I able to share cues by looking at the students and sharing a cue that they can understand? And by understanding, I know they are because I can see their bodies moving in sync with what I'm saying. These are some of the questions you can ask to know if you have a sequencing problem. And this video can be the beginning of the solution. So with that, I'm going to base the sequence building on some of what I've shared in my sequence building template. So again, if you don't have that, send me an email and I'll share it with you, Karen@barebonesyoga.com. So the beginning of the sequence, you can start in a very essential way by just having students come into some posture that will allow them to ground themselves. So for this, we'll use child's pose. We could just start them seated. We could start them on their backs. We can even start them standing up and doing some easy movements to breath. But today we'll start in child's pose. And the other thing I want to speak to before we begin is that I have intentionally placed my mat facing forward. And I highly encourage you, if you want to transition from the habit of practicing with your class, one easy way you can begin the shift is to simply place your mat facing the students where you can see them better and they can hear you better. And you can allow yourself to be seen. When you turn sideways, you're hiding. You might think it's so that they can see you better and understand how to do the poses better, but all that's doing is creating this dependency for them to look at you, and it allows you to hide. This way, they can see you, you can speak clearly, they can hear you clearly. So this is one thing you can start to do today to begin to make that shift from practicing with your class to doing what I call the walk and talk. So we're coming into child's pose to begin. You would hold them for however many breaths you want. And then bringing them up onto the hands and knees. If you wanted, you can start them with some cat-cows. You could have them tuck the toes or point the toes, either is fine. And you could speak to a number of different things here, the movement of the spine, the shoulder blades coming together and moving apart, doing them to the breath. And then from there, you can bring them into downward facing dog. There's a number of different cues you can use here. This video is more about the sequence itself, so I'm not going to get so much into cueing. From this first downward facing dog, walk up to the top of the mat, reach the arms up, and bring the hands to the heart center. So that is the beginning of your sequence. Again, you can put any poses in there that you'd like, but you'd want them to start from here or end that first section from here. Now, from this point, you're going to go right into your sun salutations. If you want, you can skip high to low push-up at the beginning, or you could have them put the knees down. You could have them go all the way to the floor. And you can do as many rounds of these as you want. Inhale, reach. Exhale, bow. Halfway lift. Step to plank. Come forward and lower. Point the toes, straighten the arms. Roll over the toes, downward dog. And you'd be holding them for probably 4 to 5 breaths. Inhale, reach. Exhale, bow. Lift halfway. Step to plank. Again, you could have them put the knees down. You could have them lower just a little bit instead of halfway down. And again, you could do more or less of these. It's your choice. One thing, if you don't want to have them go into low push-up, if you want to modify differently, have them stop in plank and go right to downward dog. So now from downward facing dog, have them walk forward and now reach up. Here, come into chair. So very simple transition that marks moving into the next section. This would be the third section. From chair, they can fold. All right, so now you most likely can get the sense we're moving into sun salutation B. So this is fairly traditional sequencing. Now you'll notice I just stepped the foot forward. There's no lifting of the leg, bending of the knee, opening the hip, blah, blah, blah. There's just simply step forward. So as we cut these, not even necessary additional movements, we make it easier for us to remember. And when you have your students simply step into Warrior One, what it allows them to do is build coordination without the momentum they would have if they lifted the leg, I'll do it here, and then swung it forward. So there, I can use momentum. But if you just have me step forward, I can't. So I have to use more core strength. So after this first sun B, they can walk or hop, reach up, come into chair, right? So you can see very simple connections between each section. I'm going to drop my knees here, upward facing, step the right foot forward, right? So much less extra stuff. Gets them right into the essentials. And remember, you can hear my breath picking up. I'm cutting out all of the holding. So every pose here, you're going to be holding them for 4 to 5 breaths. So that's going to add a whole bunch of time that we're not adding here. And that's the end of the second sun B. So you probably do at least 3. Reach up, come into chair, right? So you can see how you literally would not need notes for this. All you've done is a couple of poses to get them centered. And then you've done sun A. And then you've done a handful of sun Bs. This is very, very essential. And essential does not mean easy. Essential means it's the things they need without all the extra fluff. And a lot of this stuff over the years has become fluff. So now we're in downward dog. We've done 3 sections. So now this is a natural place to go into another section. So if we wanted, we could add a crescent lunge here. We could also go into warrior 2. So actually, let's do that. Let's do a warrior 2. So let's say we've now completed our sun Bs. So we're going to come into warrior 2. So notice I just stepped right into warrior 2. No extra fluff. So I'm in warrior 2. So I could hold them here. I could reverse the warrior and then take them into side angle. Okay, I realize I don't have a block. I can grab one, it's behind me. And then from this side angle position, if I want to take the half bind, I could do that, right? So once I finish this, again, just simple connections. The high to low push-up is the connection. Step the left foot forward, warrior 2. Bam, right? So I'm holding them in warrior 2. If I want, I can flip up. I can come into side angle. I can keep it extended. I could take the arm behind the back. I have my own feelings on the double bind. I can talk to you about that offline if you want. And then bringing them down here. So that's another section. Okay, so now when I go back to down dog, that's a natural ending point and an ask for the next section. So for the next section, I can come into crescent lunge. I could also do side plank, but let's stay with crescent. So I can bring the hands to the heart. I can twist. I could stay here, put the knee down. I could open. I would have a block for this. I forgot to grab it. It's over on the side there. Maybe I'll get it in a sec. And then I come down. And if I want, I can say, hey, skip the low push-up, go right to down dog. So please don't get stuck on the belief that, quote unquote, doing a lot of high to low push-up is bad for the shoulders. That's a belief. It's not based in anatomy. It's based in belief. And if you are not watching your students as they're practicing, sure, there might be a problem, but this is another good reason to understand anatomy and watch your students as they're moving. You can do as many high to low push-ups as you want, as long as you understand the anatomy behind it, and you're speaking to that and you're cueing. And at the same time, you can also give your students options. Skip the low push-up if you want, that sort of thing. So now this is another natural ending point. So from here, you can come to chair, and we're sticking with this twisting theme. And this, this sequence, I won't claim it 100%. I'm making small variations here, but this is in large part, when I was originally trained as a Baptiste teacher, this is a very essential sequence we were trained to. So if you have some familiarity with that, but I feel like even that sequence has gotten somewhat complicated over time, so this might seem even a little more essential. So now this is another demarcation here, where we've done our crescent lunge and we've done our twists. So now you have an option. If you want to include a balancing series, you can. And I would say keep it to 2 postures. So maybe I do dancer's pose, okay? And maybe I do tree. So that's one option. Another option could be maybe I do airplane pose into standing split, or I could do airplane pose into half moon. So I'm just giving myself 2 balancing postures to do in this little demarcation, this little space after I've done a bunch of stuff on the hands. So now I have another section that I'm going to go into. So this section, I could say, oh, well, why don't we do some triangles? Okay, so I can just go right into my connecting part of the sequence, which is high low push up, and then I can step into triangle. Okay, just gonna grab a block. So as I bring them into triangle, encourage them to block behind so that they are not falling forward. Okay, and then from triangle, I can have them come up. And now I have a couple choices. I can turn to the straddle, or if I want to keep it really simple, I can just have them come up to the top of the mat. Bring the feet together, and then just stick with that same idea. I'm using high to low push-up as the connecting vinyasa, as the connecting glue that marks moving into another section of the sequence. Step the left foot forward, come into triangle. Okay, so now I'm doing this side of triangle. And then from triangle, I can come up, I can step up to the top of the mat, reach the arms up, hands to the heart. So this is another natural demarcation. So if I wanted from here, I have a couple of places I could go. I could step back and do a couple of forward folds in this wide-legged straddle, and then step to the front, and then do it on the other side. Okay, maybe I do a variation here, maybe I do arch your arms. And this is something I could change from class to class without changing the whole architecture of the sequence. The other thing I could do at this point instead is I could teach twisting triangle. But because I've made the transition just that one piece, I'm at the top here and I'm just going to step back into twisting triangle. So I step the left foot back, the right foot's in front. Now I'm going to twist into triangle, right? I would hold that, and then I could have them come up to the top of the mat, or take that same connecting movement, which brings me to the top of the mat. Okay? So now I'm up here, just got to do the other triangle. Step the left foot back, right? Take the arm up, bring the hand down, and then I do this triangle. And then from here, I can move through high to low push-up. So I'm always using that as the connection. Okay, so now from here, I can step forward, come on up, hands to the heart. So remember, one thing is if you did add the step back and the straddle, I don't know if I said it, but you would do it on the other side as well. You don't even have to, right? It's not a big deal, but you could if you wanted. Otherwise, you maybe do the triangles. Another option from this standing position, instead of those things, is you could do pyramid pose. You could just have them do pyramid, maybe 2 blocks, and then you could do it on the other side. So now you've pretty much done all the things you want to do on the feet. You could even here do another balance, like something meditative, like tree, if you didn't do tree in your other balancing series. So that pretty much covers things you want to do standing up. So now you can bring people down to the ground. So what I would typically do, and I think I might actually come out of the camera view if I come down here, but you can have people come down to the belly, okay? And on the belly, you've got a number of options. You could take them into locust pose and a whole bunch of variations there. You could take them into bow pose. I won't do that, but you have a sense of that, right? And you could even have them do something with the arms out in front, with the legs straight back, maybe some variations of the arms. So those are all things on the belly. So once they complete the things on the belly, it's a natural ending point for that part of the sequence. So now we're gonna flip them onto the back. So from the belly, have them come into downward dog, and then flip around onto the back. So now again, I'm not gonna do all these, but on the back, you've got a bunch of options. They can come down onto the ground, and they can do bridge. You can do wheel if you choose. You could have them do legs up the wall. You could have them do shoulder stand. You could have them do happy baby. These are all things they can do in the back. If you want to do some core movements, you could have them do that as well. So now they're done with doing things on the back, and you can bring them around, and you can do just some simple half pigeons. If you didn't want to do half pigeon, you could just do a lunge or a low lunge, right? So you've got some options there. Typically, I think what most people would do is half pigeon on the right, half pigeon on the left. So now you're at sort of an ending point where you could take them into spinal twists and shavasana, or if you want to add something else, you could take them through some restorative poses, maybe like a forward fold. You can have them in a seated position with the hips externally rotated, and then end them in shavasana. So I hope you've seen in this video that putting a sequence together, and this is what I outlined in the template, and I wanted to show it to you here in action, is really simply a matter of having different sections of your sequence. You must start with what is the intention of your sequence. So a restorative sequence and all levels flow, functional movement, yoga for moms, you know, whatever your objective is, because everything flows from that, follows from that objective or theme or focus. And then you're simply picking the sections of the sequence you want to include and the poses that go in each section. But the thing that I really wanted to emphasize today, and why I'm doing this actively as you're watching, is I wanted to show you how simple it can be, and how my bet is that you're adding a lot of extra things rooted in beliefs that you need to do that. You don't need to do that. Your students will be served so much more by you if you go in and teach an essential sequence like I just showed you, confidently, clearly, powerfully. Then if you go in adding all this extra stuff out of a perception that that's what you need to do to keep them interested. It's not your job to keep your students interested. That isn't in the job description of being a yoga teacher. Yoga is interesting on its own. I don't need to do anything to make it more interesting. And you can also see how in this video, I've mentioned a number of places where you could change little things, but I want you to resist the urge to do that and instead lean into, have the courage, because really that's what it takes, because there's so much messaging out there to the contrary. Have the courage to lean into getting really good at teaching one sequence. Teach it a lot. If you're looking for things to change, maybe change something at the beginning and something at the end, don't change anything in the middle. Another thing you could change is the types of cues you use. And another thing you could change is one day you go in and speak to foundation, one day you go in and speak to gaze, one day you go in and speak to breath. So these don't refer to changing the architecture of the sequence, they simply refer to changing the cueing, the theming that you share in your cues. You don't need to read anything at the front end. You don't need a Dharma talk at the end. These are all perceptions that teachers have that put pressure on them to show up a certain way. When you have the courage to show up as yourself, that is when you will truly build deep connection with your students and allow them to do the same in their practice. I hope you have found this helpful. If you have questions, I want you to email me, Karen@barebonesyoga.com. If you'd also like information about my program, include that in the email. Just include the words, tell me more, and I'll find out a little bit more about you, and I'll see if you are a yoga teacher, I can help too. Thank you so much for watching, and namaste.